Welcome to Giants Nation Player Profiles and Projections. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, the Football Grump, and today we're looking at Wan'Dale Robinson and Kayvon Thibodeaux. We're going to start with Wan'Dale Robinson, 24 years old, at 5'8", 185 pounds. He had 93 receptions, 699 yards, and 3 touchdowns on 140 targets in 2024. He was 12th in targets, 13th in receptions, and 51st in yards. But is it new QB, new Wan'Dale in 2025, Grump?
What's going on, Bobby? I think that it might be, and for his sake, it better be because he's in the last year of his rookie contract, which means that he is on the open market. So if he wants to make money, he's going to have to be hoping that the production matches something completely different.
But here's where I get a little worried is we just kind of like, quarterback. He's everything better now. And, Wan'Dale, he's going to be used so much more down the field. I do think quarterback play can help Wan'Dale in some ways of having more efficient targets. The issue is I think this quarterback specifically with Russell Wilson is not going to target him very often. And I also don't like this idea of like, now he's going to be used down the field. He's 5'8" with the shortest arms in NFL Combine history ever, I believe, for the wide receiver spot. I just don't think that's what suits him best. What suits him best is the role that he has. I just think he'd be better off. The way to have him better is he has more space underneath, and honestly less targets because he should never be targeted as much as he was last year.
So, yeah, I mean, and that's where I think that things are going to change for him. I don't think it's going to be the number of targets or even the kind of targets. I think it's just going to be the quality of targets. So I don't think that he's going to be stretching the field too much now that Russell Wilson's there. But I do think that Russell Wilson's ability to throw the ball deep and his aggressiveness to throw the ball deep often and hit on it will force defenses to expand their defense. If he can expand the field, if Russell Wilson can expand the field, then, looking back at Wan'Dale Robinson's 2024, he played all 17 games for the first time in his career, and he was targeted 140 times. But he also made 700 yards out of that, but it was his lowest average, right? And his average depth of target was 5.1. It was never really great, but if you watch a lot of his catches last year, a lot of times they're in third and long, and he's catching the ball somewhere around 5 yards, and he's got like 6 guys around him. And he'll break like 3-4 tackles, and he always seems to fall forward, but he's never really getting much of anything because it's sort of like it's something that defenses give up. But I do think that when he gets into one-on-one man situations where he's up against a slot, I think he can get open. I think that he has the route running ability. He has the quick twitch movement and gets his head around quickly. I think that he's really, really good at that stuff. It's just if he's not surrounded by 6 dudes in off-man coverage or just in zone coverage ready to pounce and just trigger and close in on him, I think that he can have, more yards after the catch. I think that the quality of his targets will go up. It won't be the number of targets, hopefully. I can't imagine another year of him getting over 100 targets like that.
The yak is the key when it comes to the conversations about getting more out of Wan'Dale Robinson. He had 7.5 yards per catch last year, was the lowest in the NFL. He was the third lowest last year, only in front of Allen Robinson and Kadarius Toney, former New York Giants greats. But again, he had the 12th most targets in the NFL last year. What was the number? 51st in yards, the third lowest average depth of target, the 4th lowest the year before. He was 78th out of 110 wide receivers in yards per route run. And that's a guy who's getting that many targets is 78th in yards per route run. So with the new quarterback play stuff with Russ, I don't give him the QB bump that other players do, but here's what I think changes. Like you get more of those 10 to 15 yard corner out routes, right? Because I think he transitions well at the top of those. Get a corner route here and there. The 4-yard ins turn to, some more 10-yard in routes. But it's been kind of limited to those choice routes, but that is kind of like his best role is those quick 4 to 5 yard choice routes. Obviously you can get some bigger plays with him and some zone beaters, but that's not really about Wan'Dale's ability. That's just about, a play call against whatever coverage. and I like Wan'Dale Robinson, but like again, the key to getting more out of Wan'Dale Robinson is not target him down the field. I think that's a bad recipe for Wan'Dale Robinson. I understand he was able to do it at Kentucky, but the SEC is not the NFL. Like this is just a whole different world for him. And I think for every catch he's going to have down the field, I think you're going to have 4 or 5 targets where it's like this is not successful. So like his best role is kind of like that Cole Beasley role, and it's just get more yak out of it, right? And that's and I think that is reliant a little bit on, like you said, the space that he has. Because if he has space, he can turn a 8-yard route into a 20-yard route. If he doesn't, and it's a zone coverage that's focusing in on him, then he's not going to do that. But yak numbers, they made him the entire third down offense last year at times. He was 22nd in yak last year with that amount of catches. And to try and find like a comparison, Khalil Shakir was second in yak, right? And a very similar role on 45 less targets.
Yeah, but I think that speaks to what I'm saying. Like I'm not saying that like Russell Wilson's going to be targeting him more or be targeting him downfield, but Josh Allen stretches the field. And I don't really care who you have lined up at wide receiver, you have to defend the entire field. So if you've got guys running go routes, if you can get Wan'Dale Robinson into more situations where he's kind of in one-on-one, because he's never really going to command a double team, but if you can have it so the defenses aren't just sitting, waiting, and then triggering downhill, and he's in a situation, he breaks tackles. So I think that yak can come as long as the rest of the offense allows it to. If the offense continues to be a check down, and Russell Wilson can certainly be a check down guy too much at times. If it's
But I don't think the checkdowns are to I don't think the checkdowns are to Wan'Dale. Wan'Dale is more about quick game timing, where Russ is dumping the ball off to running backs and tight ends. Like I think Wan'Dale's targets are going to go down a ton, which I'm glad with. But I don't think he's going to be used effectively within the quick game with Russell Wilson. I think it's one of Russell Wilson's biggest weaknesses right now as a quarterback.
That's certainly true. I just mean in the way defenses have to play. I don't think defenses were really respecting any sort of deep ball the last 2 years.
Agreed.
And I think that screwed Wan'Dale in terms of yak.
Yes, that is where the end of my notes is about yak. That is the way to get more out of Wan'Dale Robinson, is make him more of a yak threat. And that's partly on him. It's not like he's the best tackle breaker in the world at 5'8". He could be a little better, but he can do it, and those are the ways to get him better. It's just on 3rd and long, like I think he's kind of a pretty useless player. And last year he was like their most targeted player on 3rd and long because Malik Neighbors was getting the attention, and like you said, they weren't respecting the deep part of the field.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, I don't really think that he's going to be seen a whole lot by Russ, especially like over the middle for those choice routes. When it comes to the middle of the field, I think it's going to be mostly the tight ends running seams or anything like stuff really deep down the field. So Wan'Dale could have a year where he statistically takes advantage of the gaps in the coverage, or his worst statistical year this year. It really is completely up in the air.
I think 23 was the best like usage I think you see of Wan'Dale. Again, if they had a quarterback who was throwing the ball down the field, yes, I understand the more space, but like in 23, he had 60 catches, 525 yards on a 77% catch rate. That's pretty good. A very high catch rate. It's going to be low yards per catch. I don't think he's ever going to have these big yards per catch seasons. And if that's the case, then I think his targets are going to go down a ton. But I think that I would so much rather have 60 catches for 525 yards on a 77 catch rate compared to last year, where he had 93 catches for 700 yards on a 66% catch rate. Like I'm just not interested in his season last year at all. So more space, he's going to get more space this year, but I think he's going to get a lot less opportunities. It's just making the most out of those opportunities. That's the key for Wan'Dale.
Oh, absolutely. I don't ever. I think a slot receiver getting 140 targets in one season is already evidence of your offense just not working.
Right. All right, you know what is working though? Body armor. And this episode is oh my gosh, I almost slipped off my little orange table. But I should have had orange mango for this orange table. This episode is brought to you by Body Armor Sports Drink. Rewrite your routine and choose better with Body Armor. Body Armor is real hydration with electrolytes, coconut water, and no artificial dyes, flavors, or sweeteners. With great tasting flavors like strawberry banana and orange mango, not orange table, orange mango. Body Armor will level up your hydration game. Grab Body Armor Sports Drink today at your local grocery store. Body Armor. Choose better. You'll be glad you did.
You'll be glad you did.
We're glad you did. Let's talk about Kayvon Thibodeaux. 6'5", 250 pounds, 24 years old, entering year 4 after being picked 5th overall in the first pick of the Joe Shane era. He had his 5th-year option picked up, but his role is set to decrease with the addition of Abdul Carter. In 2024, he had 12 games, 5.5 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss. Was lackluster coming off of 11.5 sacks and 12 tackles for a loss the year before, but was more consistent, but it still feels like we're looking for another step from Kayvon, Grump.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Kayvon is a good all-around edge defensive end, however you want to phrase it. I think that he's good at defending the run. I think that he's good at rushing the passer. And that's frustrating for a lot of people who saw him picked 5th overall and are expecting a lot more from him, especially in the pass rush game. I think that year of 11.5 sacks is pretty cool. But I mean, I think anyone that watches his film knows that he's not just dominating guys off the edge and coming roaring through. He's got a good motor. He stays consistent, doesn't give up on plays, and in a lot of those, it gets a lot of sacks and good tackles that way. I don't think that he's in any way garbage or anything like that. But I also think that what to expect from him year in, year out is going to be somewhere around, 5.5 to 9 sacks, more so than seeing 9 to 13 sacks like we saw in 2023. So, and remember in 2023, I think he had like 3 sacks. I think like against the Jets or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how he got almost all of his production against just terrible tackles or backup tackles. Like you said, Kayvon's a good player, but he's not what we envisioned with the 5th overall pick. And, I think the clear-cut answer of that is like, all right, have everyone rank who should be playing the most for the Giants at his position. He's 3rd. Nobody is saying he should be 2nd. There's not a single person who is saying that. I don't think his coaches are saying that. I don't think the GM is saying that. I don't think the fans are saying that. Maybe just his family is saying that. But he has gotten better, and last year he missed 5 games, and maybe in those 5 games he could have had 4 sacks, and then 8.5 looks better, or 3, the numbers could be better. But like to go through like the numbers over his first 3 seasons going backwards, 5.5, 11.5, 4.5. He had 5.5 last year, sorry. Tackles for loss, 8, 12, 6. Total sacks, hits, and pressures, 38, 43, and 40. But I think when you look at the rankings, it does tell the kind of the story of Kayvon's career. And this is only for defensive and edge players. Sacks, last year ranked 46th, the year before 11th. Rookie year, 62nd. Total sacks, quarterback hits, and pressures. 47th last year, 47th the year before, 43rd. So despite missing 5 games, he had, it was the same ranking as the year he had that 11.5 sacks. Pass rush or pressure percentage, last year 39th. The year before, 49th. His rookie year, 41st. Pass rush win rate, last year was by far his best year. In fact, he doubled it than his year he had 11.5 sacks at 14%, which had him 21st. 6.4% the year he had 11 sacks, which was 55th out of like 57. It was terrible. And then 9.5% as a rookie. So like he's got the speed and get off to really test and pressure offensive tackles. Like he's good using hand fight versus offensive tackles with bad hand usage. And he likes to work the outside in stuff a lot. It's just, it doesn't feel like he has that suddenness and power to his game to be the step where he's like a feared pass rusher, where he's more just like a good one.
Exactly. He's not super dominant at the line of scrimmage. He doesn't win cleanly, consistently, where he's just whipping around the edge or barreling through guys. He's just a little bit of everything, and it's not a lot of bit of anything. But this year, with the added element of Abdul Carter as a disruptor moving in, I could see him having a lot of, because he does have a good motor and he doesn't give up on plays and he doesn't just get washed out when he loses. He continues to fight. He does use his hands really, really well. I could see him getting a lot of cleanup stats, a lot of sacks, assisted tackles, things like that, where Abdul Carter is racing in there or Brian Burns is racing in there and forcing quarterbacks to leave the pocket, Kayvon stays in his lane and just cleans up. You know what I mean? Just takes the scraps that are there. I could see him having a good statistical year just cleaning up and or just, taking advantage of whatever blocking schemes have to be made to deal with the added element of Abdul Carter and Brian Burns.
Well, if anyone's going to get one-on-ones, it's Kayvon. So, like, go out there and dominate and win. And when you're facing a lesser guy, dominate. When you're facing a good guy, get some wins. It just feels like whenever he's facing a good tackle, it's like, oh, Kayvon got a few wins on him. You just don't see that. Even with Azeez Ojulari, you would get that sometimes, And I think Kayvon's a better player than Azeez, but he just doesn't have that element. And last year in the player profile, they're like, all right, we want to get him to what Brian Burns is in the NFL. But I just don't see that ever happening with Kayvon. He's a good player, but it's, with him, because the fifth-year option, we're not going to do too much of like, what's his future look like on the New York Giants? But it's extremely hard to predict about what happens if he stays around this same level as player, because he's a fifth overall pick. He's a very big name, no matter what you think. He is a big name. He's not a bad player, but he's certainly not someone who's should be getting anywhere near the top of the market at his position. So it's just like he kind of ends up as a third rusher for the Giants, and hopefully he's a huge advantage there, right? If he's a huge advantage there, then the Giants should be working to lock him up. But if he's more the same, you're talking about in 2 years being like, well, we got Brian Burns and Abdul Carter. Like, why are we going to spend money on this guy? He's not adding the value anywhere near what these guys are adding. Where when the Giants had their three-headed monsters, I don't think anybody was diminishing OC or Justin Tuck or Jason, or any of those guys, because they were all great in their own outright.
Kayvon is in the situation where he's the perfect type of player to be overpaid by another team when he hits the market. Because I think if he continues to be the same player that he is, which is a good defensive end / edge, where he's not great at anything, but just good at everything. And, just somebody that is a stalwart on your defensive line. The Giants are going to view that as someone that they can replace with a much lower draft pick than they spent on him to replace him. And every year there's a guy like this that gets overpaid specifically at positions like edge and corner. And I guess tackle too. So he's the perfect recipe to be, off this team in 2 years, unfortunately. But I guess, there is always the added element of guys wanting to stay when things are just starting to turn around. So I guess we'll wait and see on that.
Yeah, and I think we got some time before we get to those conversations with Kayvon Thibodeaux, but it's just kind of that's the player that he is. But again, he is a good player. I don't want to diminish him, and until we see what this draft class is. Like, let me ask you this. Where do you rank him on Joe Schoen draft picks? Not talking value of where they're picked, just overall, like if you're just saying building a team and their draft slot and contract meant nothing, I think he's second, right? Like it's Malik Neighbors is the clear number one. Tell me who is just right now you could just say flat out is better as a draft pick of Joe Schoen in his first 3 years.
Well, if you're taking away the element of like getting guys where they got them or whatever,
just overall players.
Just overall players. I mean, I completely agree. It's because it's almost like a negative where he was drafted, the way people view him. But he is.
It is.
He's a legitimate starter on like just about any team. Maybe like the Eagles, he's not a starter. Like there's just not too many teams with such a feared pass rush that he's not, right in the mix there as a guy that you can count on to just go out there and play well.
Yeah, it's the frustrating spot with Kayvon where it's like, man, want to see more out of you. There's more. You're more capable than more, but this kind of seems like what you are. In the run game, though, I do think he's improved a bit in the run game. He's not this dominant edge setter, but he certainly can set a decent one. And he's also created tackles for loss pretty consistently. He has eight last year in 12 games, 12 the year before, six as a rookie, so that's not a high number. So. I do think if I was Kayvon Thibodeaux and knowing that Abdul Carter is here, knowing that Brian Burns is a better player than me and very highly paid, it's going to play more than me, I would be doing everything I possibly can to keep one of those other guys off the field. And I think that's like I think he should be working to become a great run defender. Like he continued to work and work and work to be a real deal run defender because I think that's his best way to keeping his snap share pretty high.
Yeah, I would agree. And I guess I'll ask you this. Do you make anything of the Giants' first depth chart listing him as a defensive end and not an edge?
I don't. Not to
No, me either.
not to deflate that ball. I there is things that people always say don't overreact to, but the first depth chart is the biggest. Like they literally just lie. Or they just won't give you an answer. They'll say Deontay Banks or Cordell Flott. But you go look at the depth chart of every year. It's like, yeah, this is just not accurate. You guys aren't telling the truth. You guys are lying scumbags. Just kidding. They're allowed to lie about these types of things. Do you have anything else on Kayvon overall?
No, I don't think that I do. I think we covered it pretty well.
All right, that's an episode. We will see you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Big Blue.